Ah, science. We have much to thank science for. But as we only have a short time together, for now let us just thank science for your new Xbox 360.
Hey, what's up guys? It's Rick with the Digital Divide, and today I'm doing a retrospective on the Xbox 360. This is without a doubt one of the best video game consoles ever made. I can't believe I'm making a retrospective on this because it feels like it didn't come out that long ago. I can't believe that it's almost 20 years old.
It's been so long.
So it makes me feel like an old hoagie, but here we are nonetheless. The Xbox 360 was officially unveiled on MTV on May 12, 2005, and released on November 22, 2005 in the United States. After the MTV unveiling, it got a deep dive reveal at E3. The Xbox 360 looks very different aesthetically from the design of the original Xbox, which was small, heavy and black, whereas this was really meant to be stood upright and was white and just very different looking. I think Microsoft wanted to differentiate themselves and really cement their foothold into the console space to compete with Sony. The reason it was called the Xbox 360 is because Sony was on their third generation of consoles and they were about to release the PlayStation 3. Microsoft didn't want to release a console alongside of that called the Xbox 2, because from the eye of the consumer, if they see Xbox 2 and PlayStation 3, they're going to assume that the Xbox is underpowered, which it definitely was not. Now, speaking of hardware, Microsoft made a lot of really smart decisions about the architecture they used. It was based off of a lot of off-the-shelf but custom parts, so it made development so easy. The system's CPU was named Xenon and was a custom IBM triple-core 64-bit PowerPC-based chip. Each core of the CPU was capable of simultaneous multi-threading and was clocked at 3.2 GHz. The GPU in the Xbox 360 was a chip designed by ATI called Xenos, which ran at a clock speed of 500 MHz. This was a departure from their previous relationship with NVIDIA on the first Xbox. The Xbox 360 featured 512 megabytes of GDDR RAM clocked at 700 MHz. The thing of note here is that Microsoft decided to use unified system memory, which meant that there was one giant pool of memory that could be accessed at any time by the CPU, the GPU, or just general system tasks. This made development for the console so much easier than it was for the PlayStation, which took a very different approach. Unified architecture meant that every component could get as much RAM as it needed at any given time. Contrary to popular belief, the PlayStation 3 did also have 512 megabytes of RAM, but it was separated into two blocks. The GPU had its own dedicated 256 megabytes of RAM, and then the system had the other 256 megabytes of RAM. But what this meant is that if the GPU needed more than its allocation of RAM, there was some trickery to be done to kind of make that happen. It was much harder to develop for, and games had to be optimized for it. This meant that a lot of third-party developed titles looked and played better on the Xbox 360 because third-party developers didn't want to put in the time to optimize it for the PS3. According to Mark Rain of Epic Games, Microsoft had originally planned on using only 256 megabytes of RAM, but the decision to increase it was based on Epic's upcoming Gears of War title. Epic had been arguing with Microsoft to increase the memory for a while, and Tim Sweeney had sent Microsoft screenshots of what Gears of War would look like at 256 megabytes of RAM, and then at their proposed 512 megabytes of RAM, and it looks so much better with double the RAM that they were able to convince Microsoft to double the system memory. And I think that was for the best, because Gears of War ended up being a standout hit for the Xbox 360 and one of the biggest franchises in their catalog today. Microsoft rep famously told Epic, "You cost me $1 billion," and Epic replied, "We did a favor for 1 billion gamers." And I think that's true. The added investment of doubling the system memory meant that games could really look next generation, and I think Gears of War was one of the first games on the Xbox 360 that really looked like it was a leap forward in technology on the consoles from the previous Xbox. That said, the Unreal Engine, which this game ran on and became super popular during this generation, made a lot of games that used it look kind of similar with some washed out colors. The Xbox 360, to my knowledge, is the first console to ship with a wireless controller. There were other consoles where you could buy third-party options or adapters, but this was the first console to ship with a first-party, completely wireless controller. And that was a huge win for Microsoft. Every console that has come out since it has followed suit. And this was one of many advancements on the Xbox 360. The dashboard, for example, was a huge departure from the previous and kind of barren UI from the first Xbox. It featured the Blade system, which was really intuitive, in my opinion, to navigate through the menus. Unfortunately, the Blade system didn't last too long. After a series of updates, that was replaced with the more modern look that we see now on current Xbox consoles. Now, Xbox Live was a huge part of Xbox 360, and although it existed on the previous system, it really thrived here. The system was built around network connectivity. You could create an offline profile, but you were super limited going in that direction. The Xbox 360 launched with 15 games. Those games were AMP 3, Call of Duty 2, Condemned, FIFA 2006, Gun, Need for Speed Most Wanted, NBA 2006, Madden 2006, King Kong, Cameo, Perfect Dark Zero, Project Gotham Racing 3, Quake 4, Tiger Woods PGA Tour 06, and Tony Hawk. Now, Rare, who was bought by Microsoft during the previous generation, really showed up here with two quality launch games, in my opinion. When the system launched, it launched with the two consoles on the right here, the Xbox 360 Pro and the Xbox 360 Arcade. The difference between them primarily was that the Pro came with a 20 gigabyte built-in hard drive, whereas the Arcade didn't have a hard drive at all. Instead, it came with a 256 megabyte memory card. This was a really weird choice, in my opinion, for Microsoft, because the previous generation of Xbox came with a built-in hard drive for all of the consoles, and that was a huge plus for the system and made development a lot easier. This time around, the console didn't have that to rely on, so developers were kind of stuck trying to optimize games for their system because they couldn't know for sure whether or not every console had a hard drive. This would later change, and ultimately the Xbox Arcade would get phased out. Now, the Xbox 360 didn't originally launch with an HDMI port. That didn't come until the Xbox 360 Elite. This console came out in 2007 and featured a 120 gigabyte hard drive with built-in HDMI support, so you could get full 1080p out, and it featured a black look instead of the traditional white look of the launch console. Unfortunately, all three versions of that console suffered from one critical flaw: the dreaded red ring of death. This was so common that it was almost a 100% failure rate. If you had one of those three models of Xbox, at some point, inevitably, you were going to get the red ring of death. I went through 3 myself. These are the 4 hardware failures that you might have seen at one point if you owned one of these systems. Again, I went through 4 consoles myself, and primarily overheating was the biggest issue. Now, the problem was so severe that Microsoft had to extend the Xbox 360's manufacturer warranty to 3 years, which cost them billions of dollars in repairs. Now, ultimately, this was completely fixed with the release of the Xbox 360 Slim. This version of the system featured a touch-sensitive power button, a really slick-looking aesthetic, and a slightly revised controller with black analog sticks instead of gray. In my opinion, this is one of the best pieces of hardware Microsoft has put out. I had this for many years and never had a problem with this model. Now, later on in the Xbox 360's life, they tried to release what was known as the Xbox Kinect, and they were trying to take advantage of the Nintendo Wii's popularity and the popularity of motion controllers in general. The premise and the original, conceptual videos such as you're seeing here looked really promising. It looked like a really awesome way to play the games, but in practice, the sensor just wasn't anywhere near as accurate as it needed to be for this to truly replace controllers. But Microsoft had invested so much R&D money into the Kinect that they would not let it go, despite the fact that it didn't sell very well. So much so that when they released the follow-up to the 360, it came built in with every single console. That did not go well for them, and now the Kinect is completely dead in the water. Xbox 360 also dabbled in removable and changeable aesthetics with the faceplates. I always thought they were kind of neat looking since they weren't just stickers, they were actual quality plastic, but Unfortunately, they didn't catch on, and those are now dead as well. The Xbox 360 was the most diverse console ever released at the time, allowing users to play games online, download games and demos through Xbox Live Arcade, buy and stream music, TV and movies through the Xbox Music and Xbox Video portals, and so much more. It was truly more than just a console for the first time and brought the capabilities slightly closer to that of a PC. It featured the introduction of games like BioShock, Mass Effect, the Batman Arkham series, and Gears of War, for example, some of the best games ever made. The console went on to sell 84 million units worldwide, the bulk of which were sold in the United States. The system failed to gain any traction in Japan, only selling 1.6 million units there, as opposed to the 38.8 million it sold in the United States. I think that this is one of the best consoles ever made. It was really important to the industry, despite some initial hardware issues with the Red Ring of Death. It holds a place in a lot of people's hearts, and deservedly so. As always, thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments what you think about this console.